Okay. Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Jess and I'm a bookseller here at Third Place Books. Thank you so much for coming out for a great event. We are joined by author Miriam Landis, who will be discussing her new middle grade novel, Lauren in the Limelight, in conversation with Peter Boal. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping notes for you. First, so everyone would turn off your cell phones or any other noise-making devices. I will keep my part brief so we can move on to tonight's conversation, and then after you can ask some questions and then get your book signed. If you haven't yet purchased your copies of Lauren in the Limelight, we do have copies available for you. Author events at Ravenna are intentionally free, and every purchase that you make here truly allows us to keep having more great events like these, so thank you. And if you're interested in seeing any more events at any of our other stores, you can check out our fall events flyer or visit us at thirdplacebooks.com to sign up for our newsletter. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. Miriam Landis is a faculty member at the Pacific Northwest Ballet. She was a Stanford grad and also a student at the School of American Ballet and a professional ballerina with Miami City Ballet. In her writing life, she was a Lit Camp Fellow and an assistant editor at Simon & Schuster and Hyperion. In addition to Lauren in the Limelight, she is the author of 2 young adult novels, Girl in Motion and Breaking Point. Joining Miriam in conversation tonight is Peter Boal. Peter is the artistic director for the Pacific Northwest Ballet and has a long-established career in the dance industry. Illusions of Camelot, Peter's recent personal memoir about the discovery of ballet as a career, came out in June. I'm excited to see where the obvious commonalities between these 2 writers, dancers, and Seattleites goes in their conversation about Lauren in the Limelight, a heartfelt dance story with local roots. A number of the reviews I've seen speak of the reviewer's desire to have had this book as a young person themselves, including the nationally famous librarian and author Nancy Pearl. In Lauren in the Limelight, 6th grade Lauren Lightfoot is eager to get her pointe shoes and to find herself on stage at the Pacific Northwest Ballet Company, which reflects not just the youth's love, but many generations' love for ballet. Please welcome to the stage Miriam Landis and Peter Boal.
That's such a nice introduction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a way to lower these? I feel like they're
Absolutely. So, you can do this.
Sorry, I should have done this earlier.
How's that? How's that?
That's better.
Hi everyone, welcome. So pleased you're here, and I'm looking forward to talking to Miriam about this book. I love this book. I don't know how many of you have gotten hands on it, but I love it for many reasons. It addresses a lot of issues in our world today, and also it's a ballet book, which is a personal passion of mine, and it's a Seattle book too, a Mercer Island book in particular. So congratulations on the writing, the publishing, the promotion of this book. How does it feel to be at this moment?
Thanks, Peter. It feels pretty amazing.
Good.
It feels like I spent 40 years getting ready for this moment. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to see lots of beloved faces in the crowd too, and especially you, because as a young student, I used to watch Peter on the New York City Ballet stage, and he was an artist that I've always looked up to since I was a kid. So this is kind of a sort of amazing full circle moment for me. It's really special.
We crossed paths quite a bit, certainly both students at the School of American Ballet. We're different generations, but also I was so relieved that about your education in publishing and writing. Can you tell a little bit about how not many ballerinas go on to work in book publishing and being authors? How did that come about?
So, how many hours do you have? I'm just kidding. After I left, I danced with Miami City Ballet for 4 years, and then I did kind of take an uncommon path. I just felt like I wanted my world to expand a little larger than what I did in dance, which was amazing. And so I moved home to Salt Lake City, and I did a year at the University of Utah, and then I transferred to Stanford. And I originally was on the pre-med track because I had this, right? I know there's a couple doctors in the audience. I ended up marrying a doctor, which was kind of ridiculous. But I realized, well, part of the reason I did that is I felt like I had to prove I was doing something really important, since dancers always feel like they're doing something really hard and important, and I felt like I needed to prove that I left for a good reason. And what I realized is that I didn't enjoy seeing people in pain every day, that I had this career where we see the most beautiful, healthy bodies doing beautiful things, and shadowing doctors, it was the reverse. So I kind of had this come to Jesus moment one night where I watched ballet videos all night, and then I switched my major to English. And I had a friend who, little known fact, I started writing the sex column for the Stanford Daily.
You heard it here, people.
But it was anonymous. It's always been the Roxy Sass column for years and years and years. And so that's where I got my writing start. And I had people that knew I was writing and kept coming to me and saying, you know, for a while actually before the pre-med quitting, saying, you know, this is really something you should be doing, not the sex part, but the writing part. And from there, I had a connection that got me an internship at Simon & Schuster in New York. And so I went there for the summer. Sorry, I didn't mean to tell the long version. I went there for the summer. When I was there, I would actually intern under one of the most famous nonfiction editors in history at Simon & Schuster, Alice Mayhew, who edited all the President's Men, Bob Woodward, Jimmy Carter. So I was literally answering her phone, copying her Rolodex, like watching the cake get mixed. And I was just hooked. I mean, it was like, you know, I was a little starstruck as a ballet student, seeing Peter Boal in the hallways. Well, then it was, you know, seeing the writers in the hallways, and I just loved the people. Like, they were just so intellectual. There were so many subjects. Like, I was never going to be bored. So after that internship, I came back the following year after I graduated, and I worked in publishing for 4 years, and then ended up, through a very strange trajectory, coming to the Amazon Books team. That's how I came to Seattle. I was away from ballet for like a decade. And when I left Amazon, my husband actually was like, we were trying to get pregnant and I didn't want to have a big corporate job. And he's like, well, why don't you go teach again? And I remember he drove me I interviewed at Issaquah Dance Theater. And it had been like 10 years since I taught a little in college, but I remember walking in there and feeling like, oh, I'm home again.
Yeah.
And so I also went to work at my local bookstore, Island Books, because I live on Mercer Island. There are 2 former owners of Island Books in the audience, which means the world to me, who I basically walked in and begged for a job. So I did a lot of stuff for them too, the blog, the monthly book club. So I've just always kind of had my foot. As a much older adult, I managed to figure out a place where I could have my 2 passions in my life in a way that they really meant something to me, and I could have my family and my real life, and then here I am. So I skipped over the writing books part, but that was a very long-winded answer.
I'm excited because I didn't know there were 2 books that preceded this book. So,
Oh.
and they're being reissued, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, there are 2 other books. They are called, one is called Girl in Motion, and one is called, it will be republished as Girl on Point, because it was originally published as Breaking Point, but Breaking Point became a really cheesy reality show about Ballet West, so we're like moving on from that title. And those books, part of the reason when I moved to New York to work in publishing is I was trying to write a novel in my 20s. I think it was really therapy for, you know, as when you leave the dance world as intensely as we did it, it's kind of a crisis moment of who am I? And so I was kind of trying to sort out and write towards my younger self, like what had this experience meant? What did I wish I'd known? Those books have another long story. I had a big agent who tried to sell them to publishing houses at that time. This is 20 years ago, when Twilight was big, and there were no vampires in my book.
Oh,
So that was, yeah, my husband's still trying to get me to put vampire. There might have been a vampire. But anyway, we couldn't sell them, so they went in a drawer, and I just said, I'm not a writer, and then kept writing. And 10 years later, when I got married, my husband pulled them out of a drawer and said, it was right when I was in there, there's a very dear Amazon friend here too, who is right when Create Space began, and the self-publishing thing started, and I was right there. My husband was like, well, just, you know how to do it. So we did. And this is a whole backstory Peter doesn't know, but the shocking thing about those books was that they were not designed, they were not edited, they were like amateur hour all the way. They sold over 10,000 copies.
wow, that's a lot.
And that's like before real social media. Like I just put it on my Facebook page, and I knew a lot of people because I've danced in a lot of places. So, I mean, things like that. They're just, what I learned from that is that there was a need for these kind of books. There's a niche, there's an audience, and there's nothing. I mean, there was like 5 books in the market. So
I want to get to Lauren and the book, but my first question about Lauren is really the ballet world, and you and I shared homes of School American Ballet, and I know quite a bit about Miami City Ballet, Ballet West a little bit, and also Pacific Northwest Ballet. But before we go to ballet, it sounds like there's something about publishing and book world that can be revisited by authors today, which includes self-publishing and social media as new frontiers for how books are distributed and attention is put on them. Did you feel like that some revisiting was needed in the publishing world for authors today? And you've been sort of an example of how that's been addressed.
Thank you. I guess I didn't fully answer the question of the other books, and that yes, they are being reissued. I'll sort of bring that around, but because I had learned enough to do this, I will now be reissuing those other two books. I've revised them, basically rewritten them as a 40-year-old versus a 20-year-old. And Sarah Gabriel Ryan, who is one of the shining lights at PNB on the stage, is going to be my cover girl. So she's on the two covers. And those stories actually cover the sort of SAB years, the high school years, and then the next one is her first year in the company. But yeah, so the way that this book happened was that I spent over 2 years trying to get an agent for this book. I mean, I wrote everybody, and I knew a lot of people in the industry, so it wasn't like I was just at the bottom of some of these were through people I knew, referred, and all I kept hearing was, ballet is too niche. We don't know how to market this book. It's too niche, like over and over. Well, the problem was not, if someone had said the writing is bad, the story is bad, nobody wants that, I might have taken a little differently, but the more that I heard that, the more I knew from my very unique little position that was not true. And especially because of the experience self-publishing those other books. And so it was that feeling of like, I knew something that other people didn't understand. And so after about 2 years of that, I turned to my husband and I said, I'm really tired of being rejected. Really, really tired of it. Can we just start a business? And he agreed. I said, I'm never buying a new car again. We'll just do it instead of a new car. And so I started my own press, Rhododendron Press, and I hired a packager. I had worked with this illustrator, which is a whole other story, for a long time. She knew about the project early on and wanted to illustrate it. She was also a dancer. This was her art. She didn't want to be paid. She just loved the story, loved the idea of having this book in the world. So I already that helped egg me on. So I hired the illustrator, I hired the packager, and then I started doing my crazy social media experiment. And it actually started with after about 2 years of hearing no, I tried to put a book trailer online. And I have an adult ballet student who's a big social media influencer. I have a lot of adult students that have this secret life that I don't even know about. And she saw my trailer, and she's the mochi mommy. I adore her. And she's been in my adult class for several years. And she just said, well, let me help you. She held up the phone and said, hey, Miriam, how do you do a plie or whatever? And we did this 2-second video. And as Peter all knows, like the first 3 videos went viral really fast. Yeah. And after that, I was like, well, I know how to publish a book. I have written the book. I was an editor. I know how to promote the book. And I have students who I know need this book. And so a lot of it was just having a lot of nerve and not being told no, or being told no and just knowing what was in my heart was the right thing to do, or maybe it just was for me, but just to keep going.
And that's a kind of a life lesson for all of us, and particularly for 12-year-olds, and some of them in this book. And sometimes some of these characters, parents have an idea of who they should become, what they can't become, and each individual needs to find themselves in this book. Back to the ballet schools that we lived in, I have a great fondness for some of them. I'm very fond of the School of American Ballet, and yet I saw many of the flaws that existed in that environment. How much, I mean, this is about a ballet world that's potentially not inclusive to everyone, and yet during the course of this book, I see ballet stepping forward and embracing and inviting people in that have not been invited previously in a way that I found inspiring. It's kind of like a little whoosh to what the ballet world could be in this time of evolution. Can you talk about your ballet environments growing up and how inclusive they were or not?
That's a really good question. So I have one of the things that is very unique about my background is that I grew up in Salt Lake City. Utah is a very Mormon state, as most people know, and my dad was the only rabbi in the state of Utah for almost 20 years. And so I always did not belong, like in a huge way. And ballet was kind of my escape from some of that. But as Peter well knows, the ballet world that we grew up in, if boys danced on point, they didn't really, but the only males on point joined a ballet company called the Trecaderos, which was basically camp. And so that just wasn't, there was a lot of hiding your identity as a male dancer, a lot of misconceptions about male dancers, and a lot of bullying, which still exists there. Just speaking about male dancers, for female dancers, the physical specifications were very specific, and if you weren't right in those specific things, like, it didn't matter how well you danced. Weight has obviously always been an issue in the dance world, but for me, my challenge was actually my height. When I went to SAB after my first year, Madame Gleboff said, well, we thought you would grow, but you didn't. And at that point, I was 5'3", and they let me come back, and I was in the top class, and I had leads in the workshop, and then, which is their big performance at the end of the year. And then about a month before the workshop performance, I learned the lead in Rubies, which was my dream. And they pulled me aside and said, well, you're not getting into New York City Ballet because you're not tall enough, and we don't want someone who's not getting into New York City Ballet dancing the lead in the workshop. And so they took me out of it. And that was Aisha Ash and I learned it together, actually. And she was wonderful in it. And Cora was the other girl who also got into the company. But so to me, it wasn't just about your weight. It was about looking a way that the director found appealing, or, I think for women, this need to be beautiful, or just to be something you're not, to just that you always are trying to look like one person, basically. It was like Suzanne Farrell at a certain era or whatever. I don't know if I'm answering the question very clearly, but there is always this need to be like someone else and not just be you.
And I think when Lauren looks at Serena, it's not, you didn't cloud it with words. You didn't describe what Lauren was going through, but it was when that perfect form walks in the room, and she felt like less. And she was a talented, hardworking dancer that enjoyed her dance, and suddenly the rug got pulled out from under her when someone else walked in with longer legs, more arched feet. I love Caroline, by the way. I don't know if people talk about Caroline if you read the book. Caroline
sticks her tongue out.
Yeah, she kind of dances with her tongue hanging out a little bit, and then she's like, but I have bad feet, and everyone's like, yeah.
Right, and she knew at age 12.
Yeah,
she already knows.
Yeah.
I kind of loved her too.
Yeah.
Richard, who is Peter's literary agent, wanted me to write a fourth perspective from Caroline's perspective, and I said, I'm so tired, I cannot do that.
But there's major bullying. There's a character named Eric who comes
Brian.
for
Eric.
Well,
Yes.
Eric comes for Brian in a bad way, and as we all know and witness either in our own lives or in our children's lives in school. I thought you didn't shy away from it. You let the ugliness show in a brave way. Tell me about Brian. He's an interesting character, and maybe the family that he exists in as well.
Okay, so Brian, the first thing I'll say is I think because of our context of being in PMB is that a lot of people may think that the Brian character is based on Ashton Edwards, who is another shining light of PMB, who is a black non-binary dancer who dances on point. Brian is not based on Ashton Edwards. I just want to be really clear about that. To me, that character was very important because I saw Brian as a prism for, or even the ballet experience being a prism of knowing who you are as a child and not having it be accepted by the world around you. And Brian has this battle to fight to say, I know who I am inside, and I am going to be the person who maybe this is a little parallel towards me getting these books published, is that, like, they know the adults are wrong, and I very intentionally did not talk about anything but Brian's desire to dance on point. I really stayed away from any other things with Brian. To me, that was the journey. This being a real outsider, sort of in traditional, you know, a very stereotypical white suburban neighborhood, and that Brian comes to this self journey more than anything. It's really an internal journey for Brian about standing up for who he wants to be in the world, and there are adults that help him along the way. And I also felt like what was very interesting to me about Brian is that at school Brian is bullied, you know, at home his father does not approve of him, but when he's at ballet they love him. He is, you know, friendship is a really important theme in the book, and he is the favorite person at ballet, and ballet plays a really, like, healthy, supportive, good role in his development in his life. And I feel that ballet does that for a lot of people, and that's not focused on. I think a lot of literature about ballet is very negative, focuses on a lot of the things that ballet does for people that's not helps them grow. And I really wanted to show some of the ways that it really is a wonderful. I mean, I wouldn't still be doing it at 45 and in there and jumping around for joy if there weren't really wonderful aspects to it. So.
And as you mentioned earlier, there's a point in your life when you had really left ballet and it walked back into your, or danced back into your life, and it was a love that you had and a true passion. Yeah. And it does that for many dancers. From my point of view, this was a dancer wrote this book. It was so clear. I could be so completely immersed in the dance world, which I love, but also explained in a way that I think if I wasn't from the dance world, I would get it. I love this Seattle-centric angle to the book too. I wonder to what extent you have a family of 4 children. Their experiences in school, does that translate into what's in the book a little bit, or is it more drawn from your own experiences?
I would say it's more drawn from mine and many of my friends, or just people that I've loved over many, many years, because you and I both have known a lot of dancers over many years. My own 4 kids are all students at the Pacific Northwest Ballet School. They're still very young. My oldest are 11. They're in the Nutcracker this year. And then 6 and 8. But they all go and they all see that this is mom's job. And it's really important to me that they have a really good experience. It's not important to me that they become professional dancers. If anything, I shy away from that. It is important to me that they get the good things out of ballet that I got out of it. So no, I think that if anything, the book is a little bit more of how I wish it would be, how I want it to be for them. And not just for them, but for my students, because I care very much about my students. And I teach all ages. I tend to teach either the younger ones or the adults, but I've taught all ages, and you just see something so deeply about people when they dance for you, and when they come in a studio and they let you look at them and they put themselves out there in a very vulnerable way. And I want it to be I don't want the art form to die. I don't want it to be marginalized. I want that good part to be preserved. And so this is a little bit of a vision of what it could be for these kids. And I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but some of these kids are really struggling with their families.
Yes.
And the vision that the parents have for the child, which may have been their own vision as a young adult.
Right.
Brian's one, you mentioned his dad wants him out of ballet,
Mm-hmm.
Which Brian suspects is because his dad is worried he'll be gay. He's worried he'll be bullied, which he already is. And he's sort of worried that he's not fitting in.
Yep.
The other one is Serena's mother, who
Yeah.
she wasn't my favorite.
She's kind of the villain of the book, right?
She's a little Cruella de Vil for me, I don't know. And I also was super fond of Lauren's family. That I love that like the dad's in the arts, so they don't have any money.
You might relate to that a little bit.
I don't know. He's the CFO for the symphony.
Yeah, but he's also very jaded in the arts, right?
Yeah. But they're super intelligent and connected, and obviously in the flower shop and all. But what lessons are there in how a child finds their own destiny that may differ from their parents' vision of them?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought about that a lot, and it's something that I've discussed with my parents a lot, because they don't know where I came from at all. I mean, and a lot of dancers that persevere in it, their parents are like, where did this come from? And it's ironic, but a lot of dancers that I knew when they were younger, whose parents wanted them to be dancers or maybe dance themselves, those are the kids who, even if they were talented, were kind of like, they didn't have to do that fight. Because a lot of what happens with dancers as they grow is not just that they're fighting in the studio and they're fighting their bodies, but you need parents to drive you to do these things. You need them to finance. I mean, once you get into the point shoes, it is a fortune. So unless you really have to get your parents on board. And so that was part of the struggle for these kids that I felt was important to show, is that they learned who they are by fighting with their parents a little bit, or pushing their parents to see who they are and then support them. And so all of them have problems at home. And another thing that's in there is a lot of times we used to look at each other and think, oh, they have it so easy, or you'll see Lauren and Serena both think that the other have this great home life.
Yeah.
And some of their self-realization is getting to know each other and seeing through each other that, it isn't, maybe it isn't great to have a mom who's a ballerina.
Yeah. I mean, Serena actually comes across as one of the more traumatized and damaged people in the book. And walking in the room, she seems like she wouldn't have a problem in the world. She has a loss in her family. I don't want to give too much away about the book, but I do appreciate that the book, I don't know that that's a topic that children of this reader's age, like 12 to 14-year-olds, really address at home. Can you talk a little bit about addressing loss in this?
Yes, so Serena's whole family is kind of reeling from a loss. That's a little bit of an inciting incident why they moved to Mercer Island. So I wouldn't just say Serena is traumatized, but it's really that she's living with parents who are traumatized. And that has a huge effect on a kid, especially that a kid who might be trying to make up or kids often feel obligated to like fix things for their parents. So a lot of her motivations are trying to heal her parents' trauma, which are not the right motivations for doing anything. Well, they are. I mean, they're very selfless, but they are not helpful for kids. And so loss is I think there's a little bit of a loss of childhood through what happens to each of them. There's maybe a loss of illusions of what ballet is. I think that all the kids come to realize that ballet is really hard work. That it is, and I mean, at the beginning, Lauren's just the best, and she walks in and she points her foot, and everyone's like, "You're fabulous," right? And by the end, like she's in there, and actually, one of the passages I was going to read addresses that.
Start that.
Yeah. I should read that. I have a passage picked out actually that really addresses one of the things that they really learn. It kind of illustrates her journey. It's not very long.
Take it away.
Okay, so this is so Lauren's had an injury and she's been out for a while, and she comes back to class. And this is her, each chapter there's 3 voices, so the chapters alternate between Lauren, Serena, and Brian. This is Lauren speaking. After the grand reverence and the applause at the end of class, I waited until the other girls left the studio. When the room was empty, I approached Ms. Evangeline with an apologetic look. That didn't go so well. She nodded. You have work to do. I know. Her face was severe. You can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and take the lower class. I felt sick, absorbing the difference between saying I would work hard and doing it. 5 days a week was a lot. She studied my face. It's up to you. I took a deep breath and nodded. We can't afford it, Dad said through clenched teeth when I asked about the extra classes. The next day, after I told Miss Evangeline, she said she'd call my parents. At bedtime, my mom told me they'd work it out. During the first week of daily class, I hoped Miss Evangeline would praise my hard work. I waited and waited for a compliment. She said nothing. I noticed the encouragement she heaped on the other students, and even though she said little to me, she did watch closely as I pushed through her most challenging combinations. Nothing was exciting about my extra time with the lower level classes. I went through the paces every day, working on the placement of my fingers, the speed of my tendus, and the angle of my head. Instead of correcting me in words, Miss Evangeline often tapped on my raised shoulder or swayed back. There was one thing that changed. Ms. Evangeline was friendly to all the parents and students, but most of the time she acted with a professional distance that kept her boundaries firmly in place. The harder I worked, the more energy she invested in me, especially when she started harping on me for small things like a sloppy fifth position. One day it just came to me what she was doing. She wasn't angry with me. It didn't matter to her that I'd taken a few months off. She focused on me the same way my mom grew her seedlings for our garden, carefully watering, fertilizing, and maintaining the proper conditions to make a plant flourish. Once I understood Ms. Evangeline's intentions, I found every possible excuse to dance, whether down the hallway at my house or until closing time at the studio, when Ms. Evangeline turned the lights out and told me to go home.
I love the garden analogy too. I can totally see it. And that's what ballet can be, is where flowers get to bloom. And we also know there's a time and a place and instances where it's not. Can you go back to when you received your very first pair of pointe shoes and what it felt like?
That's a good one. And actually, I should clarify, because when I spoke at Erin's nodding, right? After I spoke at Island Books on Sunday, a couple people came up to me and said, "I'm so embarrassed, but what does it mean to go on pointe?"
Oh, yeah.
At which point I was like, oh my God, I'm such a bubble. Like, we don't even realize this is like common language for us, but for some people, they don't even know what that means. So in ballet training, you really do need to start pretty young if you're at that age, if you're going to go on pointe as a teenager. And typically kids receive their first pair of pointe shoes when they're about 12. And it's based on whether they've developed the muscle strength to go up on pointe without hurting themselves. And that's something at P&B at the school we check very closely. And a lot of times kids end up repeating a level. It's usually level 3 because the school feels they're not strong enough to stand up in pointe shoes, because you really do need to have certain developed muscles to do that safely. And for kids, the pointe shoes, like they can't always process that. They just want to move up. They just want that acknowledgement. But the shoes, I compare it a little to like a bar mitzvah, that it's like an outside symbol for dancers of saying you're an adult, or you're a dancer now, you're a ballerina when you get your shoes. And it just means that then you start over at the bar doing really basic exercises, trying to stand them. That's what it means. Did I clarify that? It's when you get your pointe shoes and you get to dance on pointe, but you don't really get to like walk in the middle and do a pirouette immediately. You have to stand at the bar and do a million releves to even like stand up in them. It's really hard. So anyway, when I first got mine, I remember they were Capezio. They were Pepto-Bismol pink. I remember going to the dance store with my mom, which there's actually a scene in the book where they go to the local dance store that has like the Sugar Plum Fairy music and the, and there's almost like a fetish about it. I don't want to say it like that, but for little girls, it is a huge, huge deal. It's a coming of age thing. And I remember just being like over the moon. And what actually I tried to show in the book is that you're over the moon for like a week, and then your feet start bleeding, and you're like, what did I sign up for?
Right. You have a line at the end, it's sort of a denouement for Lauren, but she realizes that going on pointe is growing up. And when you talked about that moment, it is true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a level of growing up in ballet. It's reaching adulthood as a dancer.
Right.
Yeah.
Except a lot of times we think it's reaching something, and it's really just starting.
Oh yeah. I don't know do you still have your first pair?
I do.
So does Kelly. My wife's 58 and she still has her first pair. She doesn't wear them, but she has them. So, yeah.
Did your kids ever try to put them on?
Yeah, way too young.
Of course.
Yeah,
right.
all over the place.
Right. We have little videos of them trying them on too. And now I look at them, point shoes are made so much better now. I love to see Kelly sometimes. Right. Like when I look at them now, I'm like, oh, these are horrible. How did we stand up in them? And now the kids today have like all the fancy, I don't know, they're studied much better. Yeah.
I love that you paint ballet. It's on the fence a little bit, but mostly I came away with thinking it's a positive, or it can be a positive environment. I liked Miss Evangeline too. I was a little on the fence about her in the beginning, but she comes through. She's the gardener in the end. She provides.
Well, she has a real moment at the end.
Yeah. Talk about it. Yeah.
Well,
she maybe don't want to give it away. But.
Well, she has to make sort of a decision. Is she going to stand by her students, or is she going to, there's the outside political world, which is also a coming of age thing in the ballet world, or basically any profession that you go into where it looks like one thing. I mean, even when I was doing pre-med, it looked like one thing. And then when you're in it, it's something else. It's a lot more complex or not as idealized as an adult. And these kids do reach a moment where they see Ms. Evangeline and some of the parents grappling with the politics of what goes on behind the scenes that makes the performance happen. So that was very interesting to kind of examine it from her point of view.
I have questions that I shouldn't ask you in front of people and being filmed, but I was dying to know who Patricia De La Rosa was based on. But you tell me another time, because she's like...
I'll tell you, she's an amalgam of... yes, that was a very interesting... So Patricia De La Rosa is the prima ballerina at Pacific Northwest Ballet who comes to the small ballet school to make her choreographic debut, right? And she has... I had a really hard time with that character, but I also fascinated by her because I have known so many, and you have known so many versions of this. Like, who is this prima ballerina, right? I think that's a very complicated role. Just like being an artistic director is a very complicated role to play, both on stage and off stage. So I'll tell you later.
Okay, good. I'd love to. I want to ask you a final question. I also want to open it up to the audience because you may have questions about this. What are the takeaways that you were hoping readers? I mean, first of all, identify the age group that you think this is perfect for. I thought it was great for 58-year-old males. I loved it, but that's probably not your target audience. But what do you want people to walk away from the book and realize or think about?
Okay, so I am very curious how the kids are going to react to this book. The characters in it are 12. They're in 6th grade. My own 11-year-olds wouldn't read it, or they would read it and walk away and get bored, but I think they were just really close to the material. It was like a little too close. Adults have responded so well to it. I think it's a bit of nostalgia for those of us that have this in our childhood. I think a lot of people will identify with that. I guess I'm hoping that the kids read it, but I'm also really hoping that ballet parents read it.
Yeah.
Because nobody affects the young dancer more than their parents. Like, that's who's at home with them at the end of the day. I mean, I can't tell you, even just driving the carpool to Nutcracker or home from class, the things the kids say in the back that you hear, that you grow to understand that, like, maybe a teacher might have said something meaning one thing and the kid takes it in a different way. Or all these things that, as a ballet teacher, we try to understand in the studio. It's the parents who take them out of the studio and nurture them and support them. And it's a middle grade book, and that's mainly categorized because the book publishing industry says that the characters are 12. It's a middle grade book. End of story. But to me, and one of the reasons why I really felt like it was getting turned down is you can't it doesn't fit neatly in that genre, because I do think that a lot of adults will be struck by these characters. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing what young dancers think about it, because I haven't had that many young dancers read it and give me feedback. And also my older books, I think, are very much an act of nostalgia too for people that danced when they were young. So I don't know if I answered it, but I'm curious from, when I went to the PNBA trade show, the Pacific Northwest Bookseller Association, and I I was very surprised. That was kind of the first time I started really talking about this with, maybe not my immediate ballet friends. And there were so many people who came up and said, my sister danced when I was a kid, and I just really never understood what she went through. Or, I have a niece, and I was like, oh, wow. Like, I could see why this might resonate in a way that I didn't expect.
It's both an honest take on the ballet world, a somewhat utopian take. I think it has aspirations for the ballet world of what it could become. I was so happy it wasn't whip cracking and bloody toe. There's so much of that.
We need that, right? We need something besides that.
Yeah, no, it was really refreshing. And obviously an insider's point of view, and also a parent's point of view, which I thought was rounded it out.
Thank you.
2 more questions for you. One is, when this audience reads it and loves it, what should they do to help promote the book?
Oh, you're so good, Peter. Anything you can, but actually something that really helps that's easy is if you will go on Amazon and Goodreads and write a review. That's hopefully doesn't take you very long, but truly that's what people look at when they're thinking and making a decision about buying a book. And then social media is huge right now, and we're probably not the age group. My hope is if you have a 12 to 15-year-old who does TikTok and they want to put a review on TikTok, just to have somebody on there saying like, this book is awesome, can change the whole trajectory of a book. So anything like that I'm so grateful for, especially as an independent publisher and writer, who in a way I would admit that I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, and that I want the book to be successful, not only because I need to make back the money and invest in it, but I want to be able to say, no, ballet is not niche.
Yeah.
Like, this book works, and this is why. That's really my hope.
Yeah.
So I have a little thing to prove here. So help me out.
Yeah. I think the book has value for people that aren't even connected to ballet. I just thought it had enough broad themes. You were going to read one additional passage, and I'll open it up to you for questions after that.
My hope is that it isn't just for ballet dancers, although that was sort of the obvious audience for me, but I think for any parent who has a kid or kids who are pursuing any passion, whether it's swimming or karate, I don't know, anything like that, all of these activities that our kids do that they're so overprogrammed with, ballet is only like a reflection of one of those things, of how kids have to navigate who they are within these activities that all the kids around them are doing, and they aren't like all the other kids. And that's my hope is, yes, this is about ballet, but it's really about growing up. So, okay, I had one other little section I was going to read. It's not very long. And this is near the end, and this is Serena talking. The glue connecting my dancing self to the real me dissolved when I walked up on that stage. I wasn't Theo or the person Mom wanted me to be. I never was and never would be, and I knew that I was destined for different things. When the principal stretched the microphone in my direction, I came forward and pulled it close to my mouth. You might be wondering what I'm doing up here, I said, clearing my throat. My friends and family think of me as a dancer. But if there's one thing I learned this year, it was not to care too much if other people misunderstood me. The problem is when you misunderstand yourself. I looked right at my parents. Brian, Caroline, and Lauren were jumping up and down, clapping their hands together and cheering. I sang Climb Every Mountain a cappella. The choir joined in after the first verse. I was initially nervous, but a minute in, I let loose and belted out the words. Even with the untrained notes, the strength of my vocals came shining through. It was a moment of triumph. I glanced at my parents, and they had stopped fighting. They were staring at me. Even Mom's face filled with pride.
I love that. Bravo.
Thanks, Peter.
Questions, thoughts, things you want to ask or share? Anybody read it yet? I know it's only just recently released. Okay, yeah, great.
I have 2 questions.
Sure,
Okay.
jump in.
Okay, the first one is,
Since you're right there.
do boys go on point? Like, okay, so the shoes
Great question.
on the cover, and maybe you can talk about the shoes on the cover,
Oh,
right?
good question.
Okay.
Right? Oh, Erin, you're so good.
Well, I'm
Okay.
so dumb about ballet.
No, but you know what? This is also why I feel it's very important that we're talking about this
Right.
stuff, and why I've sort of become a little loud. My husband's like, I'm sick of seeing you on social media. I'm like, okay, but if I don't do it, who's gonna do it?
Yeah.
Historically, no, boys don't go on point. If anything, that's a very ballet has been very gendered, right? Very much, the women are the swans and the whatever, and the men are there to carry them and lift them up. And I think there's been a real push at changing those norms in the last few years. And like I said before, historically, if men wanted to dance on point, they would go off to the ballet trocaderos and do it in a campy, like jokey kind of way. One reason that I love that I work at PMB and work with Peter especially, and I feel like, I don't want to turn it on to your book a little bit, but Peter has really been a leader in the dance community for inclusiveness and allowing his dancers to be who they are. And that is why we have several male dancers at PMB who dance on point. And they don't do it because this is boys dancing on point or anything like that. They do it specifically because these individuals, that is their expression and who they are and how they make their art, and they're beautiful. And so I think it's changing, and that's some of why I felt this was really important to include in the book. And we didn't touch on this, but the Brian character was very challenging for me to write, and I had several writers who told me not to write that character because there's a very common thing going on in publishing where, as you know, I'm a white middle-aged mom, so to write about a black boy who wants to dance on point, I fully anticipate I will be criticized for. I did all my homework. I did my very best to get this character right. It was very, very important to me. I even had a black writer who told me not to write the character, that I didn't really, and we talked about this at length. We had a very meaty discussion about it, and the more that we talked about it, the more I said, I have to write this character, because if I don't, there will never be a book with this character in it, especially in dance, and there are so many souls like this in dance, and it has to be in the book. And so if I got it wrong, I'm so sorry. And I tried so hard, and this character was super important to me, and I loved them. So yes, the shoes on the cover are Brian's, Serena's, and Lauren's. Yeah. Because one of the other things that was very important to Brian is not only that it is a he in the book, goes by he. Not only that he dances on point, but the shoes are his skin color. Because historically, ballet shoes were pink, ballet tights were pink. Didn't matter what your skin color was, you were trying to be a white person. And so that's another sort of thing where PNB has led the way, and I'm super proud of that, and I'm super proud of Peter. He's really done an enormous amount, and he's very humble, but it's true.
This is so recent for ballet too, because Pepto-Bismol, is that what you said?
Oh yeah. PZO, Pepto-Bismol.
Yeah, only
sure.
Pepto-Bismol shaded people were supposed to dance. But it's really in the last 5-6 years, and
COVID made a big difference, I think.
Yeah, male identifying dancing on point is also very, very recent, and
Yeah.
it's shocking that it took so long. It's just a shoe. There's no reason that only one gender gets to wear it.
Right.
So. Anyway, great question. You said you had a second one?
Yeah.
Oh, I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about your videos that you do, because I love, I'm so curious about ballet, and I love watching. I think they're fabulous. So, like, are you going to keep doing
Thank
them?
you. So I'm glad you asked, because the social media thing has been a very strange journey for me. I'm actually a pretty introverted person. You might not think so, but most dancers don't like to talk, but I'm getting better at it. But anyway, as I said before, I had this student who got me started doing those videos. And so often the structure in a ballet class is the teacher talks and the students never speak. Never. Like, we don't even know. When I was a kid, I didn't even know if my teachers knew my name. And yet I spent many, like, hours of my life with them. They were like the most important people in the world to me, and they didn't even know who I was at the time. But through teaching adults, so I've taught adults for many years at PNB, it has become increasingly clear that, like, these people are as important to me as I might be to them. And even through the process of starting to make these videos, my student was like, this is what we want to see. This is what we need to hear. And then it was a lot easier to do social media when I didn't feel like it was about me. It wasn't like, I'm awesome, that I started to really feel like I was giving them a gift. And that was very rewarding. And then the connections have been unbelievable. What has come from that. And I mean, at first I had dancers in like Germany sending me videos of their tondus and saying, how does this look? But like so sincere, you know? And then there was also this sort of gradual dawning on me that there are really no other teachers ballet teachers doing this, especially not at a major school. And I had a lot of fear about that too. And God bless Peter for saying, okay, don't do this and this and this, but you go ahead, right? Like, here are the guidelines, here's how you do it. And a lot of really cool, I mean, I could talk about the social media thing for a while, because a lot of really cool things have come from that. It has been an education for me in what the public needs to come into ballet, because we really have this historical exclusion. Right, publishing industry is very much like this too. Everybody's trying to get published, writing to agents and being turned away. And for my adult students, I can't tell you how many people have shown up in my class and been like, I've been scared to come take an open class at PMB for 10 years, and then I saw you on TikTok, and you seem so nice, and I felt like I could come.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just like the nicest thing ever. And especially as these people get to know each other, they comment on my videos, then they talk to each other, then they come and see each other.
Do they want to be in them?
Yeah, they totally want to be in them now. It's awesome, right? I'm like, thank God, because I'm so sick of being in them by myself. But it's actually been really fun. And the other thing that's really ironic about it is that it has allowed me to teach my kids a bit about social media and how it's a tool. So they see what I'm doing, and we're very, deliberate about if they appear in it, which is not very often. But I hope that they'll grow up, since we can't really avoid our children growing up with social media, that they'll grow up seeing it as a way of creating community and connection, which I think we all really need. It became very clear to me that the dance community needs this badly right now too, but that my kids will understand it in that way and not in a negative way. So.
Yeah, which one's your favorite or most productive? TikTok, Instagram, Facebook?
I think my biggest audience is on Instagram. I think a lot of dancers are on Instagram, so there's a lot of like crosstalk and things like that. I've actually connected with a lot of dance people that way that I might not have met, or that I knew when I was a kid and we had kind of fallen out with, and then you realize just how many places I've been and how far the community stretches.
It's a small world too.
A really small world. TikTok is a little different, and it's because it's mostly younger. And TikTok is also more controversial. So like the videos that do well are the ones where people start saying, well, her foot wasn't pointed in the back. Right. Or like, where'd you get that leotard? So it's just like kind of a different animal. But again, it's an education for me in what, when we perform on a stage, you never talk to the audience. And suddenly they're all talking to me, and it's pretty cool. Talk to me, people.
I love it. I watch them too.
Oh my God.
Another question, yeah.
Burning question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm just really fascinated, and you touched on this a little bit, on how you chose a career, your very first career, a career based entirely on expressing yourself without using words. And then you pivoted later, and now you're choosing another artistic form that is totally based on using words. I think that's really interesting, and wondering if you've thought about that, or like have anything to say about that. And then secondly, that the perspective in the book, when Lauren is having her big Limelight moment, that big moment is not told from her own words. And I'm curious if that was intentional, if you could talk about that a little bit, or...
It's really smart, Erin.
I don't know. That was something that I've been meaning to ask you.
Okay, I have to think deeply about that.
And then while you're thinking, I'll just tell you a little story about promoting the book.
Go.
We have a great...
Do you need the microphone? Wait, you need the
I don't know. We have a great friend in Houston I was talking to yesterday who teaches...
Go forward.
Like,
because I want it on the... People want to hear you. Erin
I hear you on Instagram Live.
Erin used to dance with Houston Ballet and Ballet West, by the way.
up here.
So she knows what she's talking about.
Our good friend teaches young kids in Houston, and she just a couple of days ago was telling them about your book and telling them about you and how you had this ballet career, and then you went to Stanford, and now you are a writer, and inspiring them to do whatever they want to do, whether it be ballet or what they could do after ballet or not do ballet. And it made me think a little bit about a passage in your book where Miss Evangelina is talking to Lauren, and I'm wondering if that is a little bit of a love letter to yourself as a young kid also. That's another question. Sorry, you can answer how many.
That's okay.
But I just want to tell you that it's being promoted in ways you don't know yet.
I love that.
I love that. That makes me so happy. 'Cause that's who it's for. I mean, yes, absolutely. Much of my writing is me writing to my younger self. I think the other two books are very, very much that. This one maybe a little more writing to my kids. Okay, I'm blanking on the two questions. Oh, the writing. Okay, so number one, Erin asked why I'm now pivoting to a different art form that is the complete opposite. And my answer for that would be that during all the years we were dancing, it's like you were suppressing all the things you wanted to say. I mean, how many years did you dance and just feel like you were holding it all in and couldn't say how you felt? And it was like when I left, I just wrote a book because I had so much I wanted to say and I never got to say it. And a lot that I wanted to say to my younger self. That was a lot of it. And the other thing is that writing, while it is a lot of speaking, you do it in private. My interest is not in, I mean, I love connecting with people, but I really cherish my quiet time. It's why I love ballet class. You're in there, you don't have to talk. When I'm writing, it's like that same flow. And so I don't think as much, right now my job is more being a marketing publicist, publisher, all this stuff, but I am very much looking forward to the time where I get to just go write again, because that's it's a happy place, just like dance.
Are you starting another book?
I actually have been working on another book for about 1.5 years.
Good.
I'm going to ask you, I want to ask you the same thing, but that's right. Yeah, so I actually, before I wrote Lauren in the Limelight, I tried to write an adult novel. I really wanted to write adult fiction, and I didn't want to write about ballet. I felt like it was like cheating. I like to challenge myself and do really hard things. I tried to shop that novel around for a while. It didn't sell. It got kind of close to an agent, but it didn't. But I kind of figured that was a little bit of a training novel. And so I'm working on another piece of adult fiction.
I'm glad to hear. There's another part to that question which I pulled you off of, but that was Lauren's big moment was not told by Lauren.
Yes, thank you.
Talk about that.
Yes, so Lauren's big moment is told by Brian, and it's actually I read an excerpt from it at the other reading, and to me, I did write it. The original draft of the book was all Lauren. There was no Brian voice. There was no Serena voice. And Richard was another person who told me I needed to write it from all three, which is fascinating. It didn't work as well in her voice. And I think that's because she's on stage. And when you're on stage, everyone else is writing the story. Like, you are just doing your thing. You're almost not thinking. And she narrates a lot of the dance passages when she's in class, whatever, but when she's on stage, and I've talked about this before, to me, dancing, writing, any sort of artistic effort is actually an act of generosity. It's an act of giving something you don't have to give. Like, it doesn't have to exist. This book never had to exist. Nobody was waiting for it. Nobody, when we dance, like, there's a million dancers lined up to take our place. We don't have to be there. And so when she's doing that, and I wanted to show what Brian was receiving, that the gift was for him. And because that's ideally what any art does in the world, is it gives somebody else a gift. So I wanted to show him receiving that gift.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
We are at time, but I'd love another question if we have one. So yeah.
Well, mine's not really. It's not a question. I just want to tell you I loved your book so much, and that I am not a dancer. I have nothing to do with ballet. Whoever designed your cover, high praise, because I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover.
No, you can't.
But, I do all the time, and the cover was so on point. And on point. No pun intended, but it just reminded me of my favorite book when I was like 6, which was Silver Slippers.
You read the Satin Slipper series?
Yes, when I was like 6 or 7.
Me too.
And it came with a necklace.
The necklace.
Yes, and it reminded me of that, and I love the font. And so I was like, oh, like, what is this? So
where
read
did you
it
find the book? You have to tell me how you came across it if you're not in dance.
because I was like scrolling author events of this bookstore, and I was like, oh, I like this cover. And so I like read the thing, and I was like, oh yes, I love YA. I love children's books, and like I love reading books that I would have read when I was like 12 because it just keeps my inner child alive.
Totally.
And I just loved it so much because I know it's not like meant for
It's meant
adults
for
necessarily, like
Yeah.
you're targeting
Yeah.
younger people, but
Yeah.
I think you'll find as you're promoting this, like you're gonna find a lot of millennial women who love your book because it's kind of why like Center Stage, the movie, was viral, and like Step
Yes.
Up, like so many girls had a dream of being a dancer when they were younger, but like maybe they couldn't afford it, or they, or you didn't love it enough to actually do it. It's just like a fantasy that you have, like you also want to have a farm and you also want to have a bookstore, like whatever, it's like one of our lives we want to have.
I should write a horse book next.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So like
Yeah.
I liked that it wasn't like so deep into ballet that I couldn't understand. It was like just enough that it like tickled that itch of like a fantasy life, and I don't know, it just like was so cozy for my inner tween
Yay.
to read it, and I loved it so much.
I'm so touched. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That really that's why I wrote it. That's exactly why I did all this.
Yeah.
Made my day. Thank you.
So I've told all my like millennial girlfriends, I'm like, oh my god, on a cozy Saturday in the fall, like curl up with a cup of tea and like read this, and you'll be 12 again, and it's so fun. And you're gonna love it. Yeah.
I'm just going to ask for your permission to post that whole thing on TikTok.
Oh.
Yes.
If you're okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
Right, but you know what though? Can I just say something? Okay, so that is what books are about, and that is what makes them work. And TikTok is only a vehicle for people to tell their friends. Where, like, when you think about why do I buy a book, it's usually a friend told you about it, right? And you love that friend, and you know that because books are really like, they go in really deep, right? So if someone you love tells you to read a book, that's why I would buy a book. So that's really my dream. Like, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. It's so nice.
I want to make sure we sell some of these books, and people also get a chance to sign. So Miriam, this has been a lovely conversation, and again, congratulations on this terrific book. Thank you for that ringing endorsement at the end. You were the perfect closer for us.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Can I just ask one thing? Where else can people find you in person? Where else are you going on this book tour?
Oh, thank you, Katie. Yes. So as of right now, I have several other events. First of all, this coming Sunday, I'm going to be at the On Point Bellevue store, which there's a lovely picture of a ballet. It's the ballet store in Bellevue where all the P&B students buy their leotards. And I love the owner. She's like the perfect shining light example of persisting and making her life her own. And the store is beautiful. And I will be there with Sarah Gabriel Ryan, who is the cover star of the other two books, which are hopefully coming in the next month or two. We are just finishing up some final production things. So if kids want to come meet the Sugar Plum Fairy, she'll be there. And she'll talk to me a little bit about her first pair of pointe shoes and that kind of thing. And then from there, the following weekend, I will be in LA at Zibby's Bookshop, which I'm super excited to go there and hopefully connect with the community there. That's November 5th at 3 p.m. maybe? It's all on my website, miriamlandis.com. And then after that, I will be in Salt Lake City at the King's English Bookshop the following Sunday, and I'll be talking with Peter Christie, who is the head of the education department at Ballet West and who choreographed pieces for me as a kid. And so I will be there in Salt Lake. And then the following 2 weeks later, I'm back in Salt Lake to teach a master class at the Ballet West Academy. So I'm super excited about that too, because I grew up there. And then December 10th, I will be at Books Inc. In Palo Alto, right by Stanford. And I'll be in conversation there with Christine Elliott, who was actually my and Aaron's ballet professor at Stanford, but she used to dance at the American Ballet Theater. And she does some incredible work. She has this Gugulethu Ballet Project where she brings students from South Africa over on scholarship. And that event will be to raise funds for her project. She won the Dance Magazine Teacher Award a few years ago, and she just is like a model of what any dance teacher should be giving back. And so I'm super excited to see her too. And from there, I don't know, if places call, I shall come, because this has just been a really wonderful experience, and it is to see people light up and feel connected with ballet again that maybe haven't thought about it or if it has felt far away from them is the best.
Big shout out to Third Place Books, and thank you to Miriam for this.
Thank you, Peter. What a great conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Tell your friends.
Better yet, buy your friends a copy of the book. Right
Yes. Yes.
Are you signing books up there?
Yes, I
Yeah,
will
so
sign
we're gonna
wherever.
have
Let
a
me just
signing
grab
right
my
up here.
pen.
You can buy the book before getting it signed, or you can buy it after. Also, if you already have the book, you can just get it signed. If a couple of you wouldn't mind stacking the chairs for me while I just get all the cables out of the way, then you'll be welcome.
This is my student. She's in my level 1 class. Can I? She keeps meaning to bring her book so I can sign it. Can I? Let me get the pen. I can't believe you sat through that whole thing. Was that